Well, my name's Todd Marcus. I'm a bass clarinetist. This instrument right here. And we have a gentleman on clarinet and a couple of his clarinets, Don Byron, who is really one of the leaders of this instrument over the past several decades now. And so I've been playing bass clarinet for about 10 years performing now, and just did a recent album called Inheritance. And a lot of the music is original compositions, and a lot of the stuff is just in quartet. But there were a few pieces where we needed a second horn, a second instrument. And when I thought about who would be a great option, there were a ton of tremendous musicians out there, but the first thing I caught myself thinking about was Don Byron, because of his inspiration to me as a clarinetist. Someone that let me see what was possible on this instrument, where it's not something that's used a whole lot in more modern settings like this. And so it was very special to me to have him on that, and then to be able to do a bunch of these shows that we have now since then. So I know you said you got to see the performance and you hear some of the music that's on the record. So I think that what we'll do today is just talk whatever's on your mind and whatever questions you all might have, and just have a little conversation.
I don't have much on my mind. Actually, lately I've been playing a lot. I didn't play so much of it with Todd, but I'm really into E-flat clarinet now. So I'm mostly thinking about E-flat clarinet. If I practice clarinet, that's what I practice lately, you know. Because it's the best instrument. It's the best. It's the king. So this is what I'm interested these days. B-flat clarinet, obviously I have a relationship with, and bass clarinet too. But this is what I'm playing. So happy about that. Happy that I own one.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe for you just whichever clarinet, bass clarinet, E-flat, B-flat, whatever, just kind of how you, being also a saxophone player, chose to make the clarinet family your voice as you had over the years and different projects of yours? And
Well, you know, I don't really consider myself a saxophone player until fairly recently. I mean, I never really had that connection to the saxophone, and I think in the 70s, you know, now there's, you know, a black clarinet player and playing in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, but then you just didn't see that, and you know, people were always telling you were a saxophone player. If you were black and you played a woodwind, you said, oh, you're just that saxophone player. And even when I went to college, I get my transcript every semester, and they'd say that I studied saxophone. Like even at that level, there was this kind of feeling that, like, you know, you don't play an orchestral instrument, you play the saxophone. But I actually never really felt any technical connection to the saxophone or sound connection. My connection to the clarinet was that I always got a good sound on it, and I loved the sound of it. And I was very much a purist about the sound. I mean, when I was studying, there was a guy named Harold Wright who had the best sound. Everybody listened to him for sound. He played in the Boston Symphony, and he did some chamber stuff, but mostly he played in the symphony, and you go to hear him play a whole note because he has such a great sound. He played double lip, so I studied double lip. He played very legato, and I tried to make that a part of my playing. So I was just always more nerdy about the clarinet and its various peculiarities. So it's not until very recently that I'm really that interested in even being a soloist on the saxophone. That you know, for years I played baritone, but I really wasn't interested in it. I was just playing it. And I really got into playing it in bands and, you know, sounding good, or, you know, being able to blend with the bass trombone player, all those things as a baritone player you're thinking about. But as a soloist, I always thought clarinet. So it wasn't a decision. I just always felt felt like the clarinet was my voice.
So talk about then the process of taking that voice and just applying it to any number of the projects you've done, or even maybe like talking about in the college time when folks were trying to associate you as a saxophone player and not recognizing the clarinet voice. That combined with the lack of presence of the instrument in music over more recent years, and I mean, because you really have cultivated that over the recent decade. So I mean, that had to be just the insight on how you approached all that and filling that void. To me, that's some stuff I would love to know about.
Well, you know, when I left Manhattan School to go to New England, which I went to New England because Joe Allard was teaching there. You know, he was a great American pedagogue, and he was very wonderful and gracious to me. And he was the first clarinet teacher that taught me anything that I wanted to know. And he wasn't judging me or saying that I was a jazz musician or, you know, like all of those things that hold you back. But my desire at that point was that I wanted to be a Latin arranger. I loved, there was a group of Latin arrangers who I studied: Luis Perico Ortiz, Louis Cruz, Marty Scheller, and pretty much if any of the Fania label records, if any of those guys had one or two arrangements on a record, I bought it and I would write out what they, you know, at least do a sketch of the good parts of the arrangement. That's really what I wanted to do. And then when I got to New England, I just got involved in kind of Latin stuff and then Latin jazz stuff in that area. And it was at that time that I met musicians like Edsel Gomez and Leo Traversa, and I was maybe a little more into that than jazz because I really didn't see the clarinet as part of jazz, which I still don't, but you know, I didn't really see that. But I treasured, you know, the whole sense of aggression that I've tried to cultivate. That's kind of the opposite of the way that I see the swing era. Mm-hmm. The aggression that a saxophone player, a trumpet player has, the drive to the beat, and to, you know, just to join in to the cacophony instead of float over it, to be rhythmically interactive. Like I think that really started with me having to deal with Latin musicians. You know, at the time I was studying congas, shakeré, you know, so like my interactions with people rhythmically really come from that, and then from the calypso that I grew up hearing, where, you know, my dad's group that he played in was led by a guy that played great clarinet. This guy was one of the great soloists I ever heard, and he was a clarinet player. He played the hell out of it. So it was really more of me as a Caribbean person that kind of kept me connected to the instrument, not so much jazz. And then, you know, when I started playing around Boston, and I think for a lot of us, before the Winton and Branford thing happened, we were all kind of following this guy named Donald Harrison, who was the first young musician who was playing at one of the clubs in Boston. Mm-hmm. And everybody kind of rallied around him. Smitty and Jeff Watts and Jean Toussaint and all these different people. A lot of the activity in Boston seemed to circle around Donald Harrison. And then when some of the younger musicians were starting to get some play, you know, Duck immediately went to New York, and, you know, he got into Blakey's group after that. But while he was in Boston, a lot of thought about young musicians, especially young African American musicians, playing jazz, and not in a big band. You know, like what was happening at a lot of the schools was more like this big band thing. They weren't thinking about small groups, and they certainly weren't thinking about leading small groups. Everybody was thinking about getting into Woody Herman's, you know, Buddy Rich was still alive, and, you know, so people were thinking about that. That was jazz at that moment before went and Branford kind of broke it. But that, I think that really started at this club Wally's and at a lot of the sessions.
Wally's was around even back then.
Oh yeah, Wally's was, you know, Tony Williams played at Wally's.
Hey.
Johnny Hodges played at Wally's. I mean, Wally's goes way back, but Wally's at that point was really transitioning from being, you know, now and after Donald Harrison, it became like, you know, the younger cats at Berkeley who were really serious about playing will go there. But before that, it was like older, you know, guys in their 40s and 50s, a lot of them kind of semi-professional players. That's who played at Wally's. And then when Donald Harrison got there, that all changed. It became like loud and fast, and let's play giant steps really fast, and, you know, it became more like that. But you know, it really helped me that Donald Harrison had been taught by Alvin Batiste, because he really had more of an appreciation for what I was trying to do than a lot of other younger musicians who basically had no connection to the instrument.
So with all that going on, as someone who was playing clarinet, were you kind of the outsider, or were you always having to do your own thing, or were people embracing, hey, this is someone that's doing serious, even though it's a lesser used instrument?
No, I never felt like an outsider. You know, what I really felt like was that was just one thing that I was doing. You know, I decided that the way that those guys were playing jazz was a lot hipper than what was happening at my school. So I did some stuff with them, but there was also like a kind of AACM of Boston, where people were playing much further left music, and I was playing with those guys, and I was playing with the Latin guys, and I was playing with a lot of kind of people at New England that were doing kind of chamber music kind of stuff. I was doing that, and then the Klezmer Conservatory Band started, and I was doing that. I knew some guys that played some Greek music, and I was trying to learn how to do that. I knew people that were playing international folk music dance, and, you know, like they knew one Chardosh and one this and one that, and I did some of that. You know, I just basically did a lot of different things with a lot of different people, which has set up my career as it's evolved. Anybody that knows me back then knows that I was doing all those things, except I wasn't like a famous guy and it was news. I was just in secret. I just had all these connections with different people. So, you know, in a way, I don't even know if I was being practical. I just really wanted to learn more than one thing. I wanted to know how to do more than one thing. So that's always been an issue more than that I ever thought that I would establish some kind of modern jazz clarinet thing. I felt like I was doing that, but I didn't feel like necessarily there would be any recognitions for that or any money in that. And you know, at the time I was developing myself as a kind of fifth reed player, playing baritone, bass clarinet, clarinet, which a lot of clarinet players do that.